Good morning and welcome once again to the Spirit of Scotland 1314 as we continue our look at the events and places that helped shape the Battle of Bannockburn in 1314. This morning I've brought you to a special place. I've brought you to Coxet Hill, which is regarded as a place that the small people, the camp followers, gathered before they came down to help in the final stages of the Battle of Bannockburn. Now it's known, or it's been said, that the camp followers, the cooks, the helpers, the baggage train were in a valley out of the way in the new park, probably at the foot of Coxet Hill, possibly between Coxet and Gillies Hill. So it was in this area that the baggage train, the small people, existed, and they would have perhaps watched the battle unfold down on the Carse lands. And as it came to a conclusion, they've gone down and helped with that final push that's led to the rout of the invading English army. So one thing that's always been on my mind is, if they were in this area, how long would it take them to get from Coxet Hill or the surrounding area down onto the Carse land as they watched the battle unfold? How many were there? All these questions have always been on my mind. So I'm going to take you on a wee journey today. We're going to take a wee donder from Coxet Hill down to the Carse land. We'll see how long it takes, and we'll look at some of the landmarks that they may have passed on the way down and the route that they may have taken. It's a fantastic place and a great day to go on a wee journey. So pour yourself a wee cup of coffee. Let's go for a wee walk and see what we can see. The views from Coxet Hill are quite amazing. You get a fantastic view across the Stirling Castle, sitting up on top of its crag, overlooking the city of Stirling. A fantastic place to come and see. So we're heading down the hill now. The distance from Coxet Hill down to the Carse, take Coxet as a reference, is just over 2 kilometres, or just over 1¼ miles if you're in old money still. So we know that roughly normal walking, you're 20 minutes a mile. Scottish troops would have been kitted up with their spears, axes and their armour, and the baggage train, the small people as they came down, they would have been tooled up with their various bits. They wouldn't have to navigate the housing estates and roads, but we'll get a rough idea of how long it would take them from our reference point of Coxet Hill to get down onto the Carse. It's a great morning for it now. It was a bit grey and rainy this morning, but the sun has come out, the clouds have parted, and we're getting a bit of blue sky and sunshine, which is great. Now, Coxet Hill actually forms part of what used to be known as a Coxet wood. It's where the gentry would have hunted for birds. In the woodland here, they would have put nets up and trapped the birds for the dinner table. A Coxet wood. I'm not sure how heavily wooded it would have been back in the day. It's quite a prominent position. So would the Scots have been able to get a good view from around, a good view around of the low-lying ground? Would they be able to watch the English going down onto the Carse, which is just to my east over here? There you see the Ochil Hills, and centre frame, way down there is the flat Carse lands to which we're walking. As we look northeast from Coxet Hill across the modern rooftops, we see centre frame there, the Demayet, as it sits proudly in the range of the Ochil Hills. Some things are unchanging through the years, and just as we look across the Demayet today, King Robert the Bruce and the Scottish troops, the baggage people, the small people as they came off the Coxet Hill area, they would have seen the Damaya just as we see it, exactly the same today. What a view it must have been, and what a view it still is. A fantastic area. Some things are unchanging as the sands of time continue to flow. There's another great view looking northwards towards Stirling Castle. What a fantastic castle, sitting proudly atop the crag, where you can survey all the low-lying countryside around it. No wonder it was such an important fortress in medieval Scotland. There's St Ninian's Church in the background. We'll be walking past here just shortly, and we'll get a better view. Looking north eastwards as we come off the hill, we see St Ninian's Church, which played a prominent part in the location of the Battle of Bannockburn. It's where Thomas Randolph's troops were said to be stationed at the kirk, and where he would have led his troops to confront Clifford and Bowman. Sits atop the Carse, and I'm sure if the small people did leave from the Coxet Hill area, they would have passed by St Ninian's Church, which, as I said, played such a prominent role in the location of the Battle of Bannockburn. So coming down off Coxet Hill, and if you take time to stop and look north-east, I think that is, you'll see the Wallace Monument sitting on top of its crag. And if you look closely, right in the centre of the frame there, you'll see the telecommunication mast, and that sits on Randolph Field, where it's said that Thomas Randolph confronted the English cavalry led by Clifford and Bowman and defeated them and sent them scurrying back to the main body of their troop. So it gives you some kind of proximity as to where we are on Coxet Hill. It really is quite central to some of the events of the Battle of Bannockburn. There's another great view looking northwards towards Stirling Castle. What a fantastic castle, sitting proudly atop the crag. Down off the Coxet Hill now, in the area of St Ninian's, and we find an appropriately named pub, Scots Way, where Wallace bled. Scots Wan Bruce. Sadly, closed and not operating anymore. This is the area of the Kirkwynd, where you'll find St Ninian's Church, where Barbour, the Scottish Chronicler, tells us Thomas Randolph was stationed at the kirk. The only surviving part of the older structure is the clock and bell tower of St Ninian's. If you look, centre frame in the background there, you might just be able to make out the flagpole which sits at the Bannockburn Visitor Centre. Gives you a wee bit proximity of where we are. The saltire flying proudly atop the flagpole at the rotunda. Kirk itself was damaged during the Jacobite rebellion when it was accidentally blown up as they were storing gunpowder in the area. But it's past this way that Thomas Randolph and his troops would have gone to meet Clifford and Bowman. As I said before, this is where Barbour says they had been stationed at the kirk, and it's past this way that the small people may have come as they headed down to the Carse land to help King Robert the Bruce in his final push. We're heading down on the opposite side of the road from the kirk the gorge of the Pell Stream. Now we know the battle took place between the Pell Stream and the Bannockburn, and you'd imagine anybody going down to help them would want to get across the Pell Stream at the earliest opportunity. The Pell Stream now just down to a trickle and very much overgrown at the bottom of all that vegetation. Would have been a much more substantial stream in 1314. And it's very steep sided as you get further down into the gorge, and would be difficult for cavalry to cross. Something always worth bearing in mind when you're looking at the retreat of the English army. Now I've come across a busy main road and stayed away from the housing area, but we're in the area of Shearer's Brae. Now a brae is an old Scots word for a small hill. I'll get you up the top of the brae, or we'll see you down at the bottom of the brae, down at the bottom of the hill, or the top of the hill. And this is Shearer's Brae. I suspect anybody going down to support the Scots in the Carse would have gone across the Pell Stream first, and perhaps went down an area known as Broom Road, which is a scalloped out area of the High Carse, which was a very, very old coastline, and it's easy access. Or they may have came down in the Shearer's Brae area, a nice gently sloping area where they can get from the higher ground down onto the Carse below. So I'm down at the bottom of the brae just now. If they came this way, they would still have the Pell Stream to cross, and they could do that at the bottom of the gorge as it comes onto the flat Carse. As I say, alternatively, you do it further up and come down, cross the Pell Stream in the area of the kirk, and come down in the area of Broom Road down into the Carse. Well, we're now down at the bottom of the brae. We're down on the flat Carse in an area known as Brae Head, and the Carse stretches out in front of me here. But we've still got to get across the Pell Stream, having come the direction we did. We'll get across the Pell Stream, which we've got to go across the railway bridge, and that will take us to where the front line of the battle took place. Now the Scottish army, when they got down to the Carse, would have marched down in good order, keeping the ranks nice and tight. And it would be the same for the small people who came down to help. Barbour tells us that they fashioned up flags and formed up as they came down onto the Carse at the conclusion of the battle. And the English thought it was another branch of the infantry coming in, and that was the final straw for them. I've had enough, I'm out of here, they said. And it's important that you keep good order. You wouldn't rush down here, as I say, it's over 1.25 miles. You don't want to get to the battlefield exhausted. You're no good for anybody at that stage. So you march down in good order and arrive fit to fight. So just as the Scottish army marched down in good order, I'm quite sure so did the small people, and that they gave the impression to the English they were another branch of King Robert of Bruce's army. No trains in 1314. Stirling Castle in the background of the railway there. People have asked what was the number of the small people that may have come down to assist at the conclusion of the battle. substantial, that's what I would say. It's been known in some instances of battles around the world that the support act, the baggage train and the people who have come to watch a battle sometimes outnumber the people actually participating in the battle. That's not the case at Bannockburn, but there may well have been upwards of 1,000 small people, baggage people, and the people from the town of Stirling would have come out as well to see what was going on. This was a massive event, it had huge implications for the area. And once they realised that the battle was going in the Scots' favour, they would have been in there, marched into it, and I'm sure quite happy to take part in the plunder that would have happened after the battle. So there'd be a substantial amount of people. My reckoning, certainly over 1,000. Enough for the English to look and believe that it was another supporting infantry battalion that was coming down. This is us in the Millhall Road area, down on the flat Carse lands. The Pell stream runs over to my left, so we're now across the Pell stream. You might just make out the Demayet over to my northeast here, and we'll come round in a few moments to where the front line of the battle took place. We're coming around just past the wooded knoll on the left hand side there, which is the remnants of the old Paul Mays pit. We'll soon be passing the old pond, which is part of the waterworks for the pit, part of a mill lade system. It may have been there a lot longer. Well, here we are at last, down in the Carse land, at the area where the front line of the Battle of Bannockburn took place on the 24th of June 1314. You'll see behind me the wooded knoll, the remnants of the old Paul Mays pit, and a few friends that have come down to join us in the fields of the Carse land. Now, it's taken me about 35 minutes to get down from Coxet Hill to the Carse land here. I've had to navigate across roads and through housing estates. The small people who came down, I'm sure there'd be a sense of urgency, but as I say, they're not running, they're marching down in good order. They need to get here fresh to be able to participate in the battle. So 35, perhaps 40 minutes to get down here, perhaps a little bit less. They would have less to contend with on the way down. The Scottish Army, well, we know they got up at the crack of dawn, which in midsummer, 24th of June, is at about 25 past 4 in the morning. Now, were they down in the battlefield at 25 past 4 in the morning, or did they rise at their camp at 25 past 4 in the morning, first light? Presuming they got up at their camp, give them half an hour to shake themselves down, 5 o'clock-ish, get themselves down here, 5:30, 5:45, battle commences. How long did the battle last for? An hour and a half? How do we know? Exhaustion. Horses going flat out into the charge, men. There's only a certain amount of time they can last before exhaustion sets in. One of them would have to crumble. So, over an hour. We know Barbour tells us that the battle stagnated for a while, neither front going forward or back, and then an onrush of Scots, the English were pushed back and the rout began. So you're getting on for 6:45, 7 o'clock. And we know that the high tide on the Bannockburn on the 24th of June was 7 o'clock in the morning. How do we know that? Well, we worked it out, and you can see that in another film, another video. But you can look back the moon phases and reference high tides from other areas, and it can give us a very good approximation of the high tides on the Bannockburn that day. 7 o'clock in the morning. So the routed English had a seriously difficult obstacle to try and get across. And I'm going to take you over to the area where I think the majority of them would have tried to recross the Bannockburn. Certainly the mounted soldiers would have tried to recross. Others we know fled in all directions, panicking and running at the point of the Scottish spear. But certainly, as Barbour tells us, there was so many people tried to get back across that Bannockburn. Many of them who fell in did not get out again. Lanarkos tells us where shortly before they had crossed the Bannockburn, they now tried to recross. In confusion, many of them fell in and were never able to extricate themselves. And they drowned there, as many of them drowned in the Forth as well. I'm going to take you around and have a look at where I think a lot of the fleeing English would have tried to recross part of the Bannockburn. I hope you've enjoyed this wee walk in the footsteps of the small people coming from our reference area of Coxet Hill down onto the flat Carse here. It's been a lovely wee journey. I hope you tune in for more from Spirit of Scotland 1314. We've got so much more to tell you about the battle, how it unfolded, and about modern day events that are taking place on the battlefield and what's happening with developments there. So stay tuned. Just now I'm going to take you around, as I say, to where I think a lot of the fleeing English tried to cross the Bannockburn and came to grief. So let's go and have a look. Well, we followed in the footsteps of the small people from Coxet Hill down onto the flat Carse land where the Battle of Bannockburn took place. And they've joined in at the conclusion of the battle as the rout has begun to take place. The English are fleeing in all directions. King Edward II of England has fled the field across the Pell Stream up towards Stirling Castle. The infantry are fleeing in panic in all directions, and the cavalry are trying to get off the field. So where have I brought you? I've brought you to an area called Crook Bridge. Now, for me, the name is in the evidence, isn't it? For as far back as you can look at the ancient maps of Scotland, there's always been a bridge here at Crook Bridge. Now, when the English advanced towards Bannockburn on the 23rd of June, it's my thoughts that they've come down the east side of the Bannockburn. There are only two crossing places. There's a ford in the area of the modern railway. Now, bearing in mind English had 2,500 heavy cavalry, where would you rather cross? At a fording place on the river or at a bridge? Would you like to be that 2,500th man across that ford? The place is going to be cut up. It's going to be a mud bath. It's going to be treacherous. However, If you've got an existing bridge, would you not use it? So it's my thoughts English have come down the east side of the Bannockburn. They've come across the Skeoch mossy area, the pools and the tidal rivulets that exist on the east side of the Bannockburn, and which were referred to as an evil, deep, wet, marshy area. They've got down onto this road here and crossed the Crook Bridge area onto the hard field that Barbour talks about in the area of the Wooded Knoll where the front line of the battle took place. How do we know there was roads down here back in 1314? Well, that's going to be a factor in a future film which we're going to discuss, the crossing places of the Bannockburn from Milton down to the estuary with the River Forth. I think you'll find that very interesting. But just briefly today, basically you had northwest of here a ford at Cambus Kenneth Abbey. No point in having a ford unless you've got an adjoining roadway which went over to the residence at Throsk. And it's my thoughts that they have come across the Pellstream Bridge, across a bridge at Crook Bridge, out towards Throsk. There's always been a road there. The Pellstream one takes you to the Abbey ford or right on to Stirling Castle, to where Edward fled. So that's what happened. And during the rout, it's my thoughts that many of the cavalry tried to recross the area which they had previously crossed. Wouldn't you? They have the advantage over the infantry. Many of the infantry, the English infantry, wouldn't have a clue where they are. They would be panicking in all directions. They don't know where they're going. They would be looking for a standard to follow. It's not there. They are going in all directions. But many of the cavalry, especially the senior members, they've been here before. They've been in Scotland. They know some of the routes and the roads. And if you had the advantage of being on a horse, would you not try to recross at the area you previously had done so? That's my thoughts. So as the Scottish Chronicle tells us, where they had previously crossed the Bannockburn to get onto the battlefield, into which the tide flows, they now try to recross. In confusion, many of them fell in and fell to their deaths. They couldn't extricate themselves and they drowned or died there, and many drowned further north in the River Forth as they tried to cross the Pellstream as well. So it's in the chronicles, it tells us they tried to recross, and I believe it happened in this area of Crook Bridge down on the Bannockburn. Now, into which the tide flows, well, it's just past 5 o'clock in the evening. The River Forth at the moment is on a high tide. The full tidal range, spring tidal range of the River Forth at its maximum is just short of 6 metres. We've got a tidal range this evening of about 4.9 metres. We're not seeing any evidence of that here at Crook Bridge. The Bannockburn is flowing freely down to its estuary with the Forth at this point. Bear in mind, the water levels are a lot lower today than they would be in 1314. The river is now dammed by the North Third Reservoir. But this would have been a significant obstacle. This is the highest most point of the tide on the Bannockburn. Doesn't go any further. There's no evidence anywhere to suggest it goes any further, although some people think it did. I think differently. This is where it was at. So this is where the confusion was. From here and to the north of here, the Crook Bridge, wherever it existed, probably somewhere in the next 1 to 200 metres area here was where the Crook Bridge would have been in 1314. There would have been carnage, absolute carnage here. So as I say, we're going to look at that in a future film. All the crossing places of Bannockburn will look in greater detail at what may have happened. Just now, we'll take a wee walk around and see if I can show you some of the surrounding area. I wish I could take you further north, but it's very difficult to access with the dense vegetation. But I'll see what I can do. Certainly take you a bit south of here and we'll have a look in this area of the Bannockburn. So let's go and have a wee look. Very overgrown in this part of the Bannockburn to the south of Crook Bridge. You'll be able to hear the traffic on the western side of the burn from the A91 road. A road here disappearing in the distance there. Don't know if you can make out the housing behind those bushes. That's Red Hall Farm. Something known as Red Hall now. But this whole area here is susceptible to flooding, and would have certainly seen the width of the Bannockburn back in the day. And in the distance you can see the bankings from the Bannockburn rising up towards Red Hall, and on the opposite bank they're rising as high as 6 metres above the level of the water. A great gorge indeed. Lots of hawthorn trees in this area. Not a nice bush to be trying to navigate when you're fleeing in a panic. Isn't it incredible to think that we've been walking in the footsteps of the most significant, or one of the most significant events in Scottish history, the Battle of Bannockburn. We've walked in the footsteps of Bruce, walked in the footsteps of the small people. We've had a wee look at some of the places where the rout of the English army took place. We can come down here to look at what these people must have had to put up with, and it fills you with a sense of occasion. What these people must have felt, ordinary people like you and I, on both sides. And it's important we preserve it for future study and commemoration. I hope you've enjoyed a revisit walking in the footsteps of the small people. Watch out for future films. As I say, we're doing one on all the crossing places of the Bannockburn. And if you want to see more, like and subscribe to the Spirit of Scotland 1314. And importantly, share it with your friends. Let them know about this magnificent piece of history that's on our doorsteps. I'll keep you updated with stories of the battle, and updated with how developments are progressing on the battlefield, and as we try to raise awareness with the powers that be to help preserve what remains, specifically of Day 2 for the Battle of Bannockburn. So share it with your friends, tune in and help us preserve this incredible piece of Scottish history. Take care, and catch you in the next episode of Spirit of Scotland 1314.